Hello everyone and welcome to Beginner's Code. Today we are going to learn how we can use Tkinter to create a custom paint app through a graphical user interface. Okay, so the first thing that I've done is I've created a folder and I've just opened it in Visual Studio Code and also in my terminal. Inside of this I've created an app.py file which will hold all of our logic. So what we'll do is we will first import Tkinter as TK, and we will also import color chooser from Tkinter. So from Tkinter, import color chooser. So the first thing we want to do is actually create a class for the application. So we'll have class drawing app, and here we'll just create an initializing function. And this will obviously be called when the app first is run. So we need to pass in self, and we'll also pass in root. So we'll say self.root is equal to root, and then self.root.title is equal to, self.root.title is simple drawing app, and this will just set the title of the GUI to be simple drawing app. So now we want to set a few variables for the base one. So we'll have a stroke color, we'll have a fill color, we'll have a tool, and then an X and a Y position. So what we'll do is we'll say self.stroke color, and we'll set that equal to black. Self.fill color, that will be equal to white, because we have a white background, so it will in essence be none for the time being. Self.tool, and that will be line. Self.startX will set to none, and self.startY we will also set to none. Okay, so now we want to actually have a canvas inside our drawing app, so we will use the canvas, so self.canvas, and we'll set that equal to tk.canvas. Now we need to pass in the root, which essentially will be the actual Tkinter object when we instantiate the app. So here we'll say background, and we'll set that to white. And then we're just going to give it a width of 800 pixels and a height of 600 pixels. And then we want to use the pack method just to pack it into the actual GUI. Next, we need to create a few different buttons. So we'll have a row of buttons at the bottom of the GUI that allows you to choose different lines, different objects that you want to draw, and then choose colors, etc. So we'll say self.button_frame. We'll set that equal to a frame. We need to pass in the root again, and then we'll say self.buttonFrame.pack. Now we want to create a line button so that when you choose that, it will automatically create a line for you. So we'll say self.lineButton, and that will be equal to a TK button. Again, we need to pack this into somewhere in the GUI. So we're going to pass in self.buttonFrame, and this will put the button in the button frame. We'll say text, and we will say line, and then we'll give it a command, and it will just be self.selectLine. Now this is a function that we will create, and it just essentially will allow us to use a line. And then we'll say self.lineButton.pack, and then we will put a side, and we'll say tk.left, and that will just put it on the left hand side. So now we want to create a rectangle. So essentially I can actually just copy this and then paste, and we'll change these two variables, or these two attributes, to the rectangle button, and then here we'll change the line to the rectangle, or the text, sorry, to say rectangle, And we'll change the command from self.selectLine to self.select_rectangle. Again, we'll use tk.left, and then this will start from the left, but it will be positioned next to the line. So now we can do the same again, and we are going to change the line buttons to the oval button, and this will allow us to create a circle. Again, we need to pass in the button frame so that they're all along in the same frame. Here we'll just change this to oval, and then we'll say select, or command is equal to self.select oval. Okay, so now we have three different shapes that we can create. We're going to create a stroke color button and a fill color button, and then we also need to create a clear button. So we'll say self.stroke color button, tk.button, again pass in the button frame, and then we'll say text stroke color, and command will be self.select stroke color. And again, we are going to pack it to the left, so stroke color button dot pack, and then side tk dot left. Okay, now we want the fill color button, so fill color button, and this will be tk dot button. We'll pass in the button frame again, and then a text of fill color, and a command of self.select fill color, and then self fill color button dot pack side tk dot left. Okay, next we want a clear button so that we can actually create a blank canvas. So clear button, tk.button, again pass in the button frame because they want to be on the same line. We'll pass in text of clear and a command which is equal to self.clear canvas. And then we'll just say self.clear button.pack, side is equal to tk.left. And now we want to create a few different ways of actually being able to bind elements depending on mouse movements. So Tkinter actually has a way of being able to bind certain mouse movements, whether it's a click, whether it's motion, or whether you've released the button. So we'll say self.canvas.bind, and then inside of here we are going to use a greater than symbol, and we'll say button -1, so that will be the left click, and then we'll close that. And then inside of this we will pass in a command, so self.on button press, and this is something that we will actually be creating in a minute. Then we will do the motion, so we'll say bind, and then same again, greater than, and we'll say B1 for button 1, and then motion, and then we'll close that, and we'll pass in self.on mouse drag. So we are essentially creating a event listener, essentially, that when you click, it will fire this command. When you click and drag, it will fire this command, and then when you release the button, it will do this method. So we'll do another binding method, and we'll say button release -1, and then we'll close that, and we'll say self.on button release. So now we have our actual attributes created and the buttons that we actually want. So if we save this, if I was to run this now, we'd get a few different errors because we haven't actually got any of these commands created, so it would throw a lot of errors. So what we'll do is we will create these elements, or these methods, sorry. So the first one will just be the select line. We'll say def select _line. Now we need to pass in self because it's still part of this class. And then in here, we'll just say self.tool is equal to line. So because we've passed in self here, we are able to access these attributes here, and we can adapt them to how we need them. So now we'll say def select rectangle and pass in self. And then here we'll just say self.tool is equal to rectangle. And then if I actually make these lowercase just in case, and then we'll say def select oval, again pass in self.tool is equal to oval. Okay, so now we need to create a way to change the color, and because we imported color chooser, this will actually pop up as a color selector when you click the button. So def select stroke color, and we'll pass in self, and then we'll say self.stroke color is equal to color chooser, and we'll say ask color, and this will prompt the user with a GUI that they can then adjust different hue and saturation and things like that. So we'll say color is equal to self.stroke color. And then because this is an array, we need to pass in the index of the first one. And now we will do the same for the fill color. It will essentially be exactly the same. So select fill color, pass in self again. Self.fill color is equal to color chooser dot ask color. Pass in color, and we'll say self.stroke color at the first index again. Sorry, that'll be self.fill color, because we are using the fill method and not the stroke method. So next we want to create or use the clear method. So we'll say def clear canvas, because that is the name of the method that we created up here. Need to pass in self again, and we will say self.canvas.delete, and then inside of this we'll just pass in all, and that will make sure that everything that's on there is deleted. So next we need to create a way of updating the X and the Y values when you have clicked a button, because obviously if you're creating a square and you start here and you end there, then it's going to need updating, and it's also going to need to remember where you are when you first clicked, where you've dragged to, and where you've released. So these are all part of these binding methods up here. So we'll say def on button press, and we'll say self, and then here we can pass in an event. And because this is an event, we can actually access different attributes of the event on the from the GUI. So we'll say self.startX, and we'll set that equal to event.x. And we'll say self.startY, and we'll set that equal to event.y. Next, we are going to use the on mouse drag. So we'll say def on mouse drag, and we'll say self, and again pass in the event. So what we need to do is create essentially a preview. Well, we'll be deleting the preview when you first come to this, because it will essentially create a preview of what it's going to make whilst we are dragging. And when you then drag again, when we first come to it, we need to be removing that preview as we click and drag. So we'll say self.canvas.delete, and then we'll just pass in preview, and we'll say if self.tool is double equal to line, then here we're going to say self.canvas.create line, and then we'll say self.startX, self.startY. So this is going to be essentially 0, 0, which is where if we were to open this and then click and drag, it will be 0, 0, or where it's updated from this on button press, because obviously if you're clicking the button, it's going to update X and Y, and then you'll start dragging. So that will be event.x and event.y. And then we want to use the fill color. So we'll say fill is equal to stroke color. And we'll also pass in a tags, which will be preview. So now you'll see that when we next come to drag, this is going to be deleting anything that has been created on the drag motion, because that drag motion will be a shape that's already created from the button release, if that makes sense. So the next thing that we are going to do is create an else if, and we'll say else if self.tool is equal to rectangle. Then we'll say self.canvas.create rectangle. And we'll say self.startx, self.startY, event.x, and event.y. And then we'll also say outline is equal to self.stroke color, and fill is equal to self.fill color. So obviously we set the fill equal to the stroke color because it's just a line, whereas now we have a rectangle, we can have a stroke and a fill because it's essentially a 2D shape rather than a 1D shape. So now we can also then pass in tags, and we'll say preview, and then else if self.tool is equal to oval, and we'll say self.canvas.create underscore oval, and we'll say self.startx, self.startY, event.x, event.y. And then we'll say outline is equal to self.stroke color, fill is equal to self.fill color, and then tags a preview. Okay, so now we've got our mouse movement, we now need to create the on button release. So we'll say def on button release, and we'll say self and event. Then we'll delete the previews again. So we've got self.canvas.delete and pass in the previews. And then we are essentially going to be doing exactly the same, but we are not including the tags. And that is because we are not going to be creating previews anymore. We are actually going to have a created product on the actual release. So now if we copy all of this and paste it in here and then remove the tags, so now hopefully this is starting to make more sense, that if you click, your X and Y position will update. Then when you drag, it will create a preview of a line. So essentially it will create the line, but then when you release, it will delete the line down here and then create a new line with the end X and Y. So the preview is only there for whilst you're dragging, and then when you've actually released the button, it will create the shape. So now that we have this class created, we just need to actually say if __ name, and we'll set that equal to __ main, and then we'll say root is equal to tk.T and then here we'll just say app is equal to drawing app, and we'll pass in root, which is the Tkinter library essentially, and then we'll say root.main loop, and that is it. So now if I come over to my terminal and I ls-a, make sure I'm in the same folder and I have my app.py. So I'll say Python 3 app.py, self.tool is equal to rectangle, so I need to change that to double equal and also change the oval. And then because I copied and pasted, it would be the same down here. And now we have a simple drawing app which allows us to create so if I set the stroke color to be black, hopefully. Right, so rectangle isn't working, but we have an oval coming out and we also have a line coming out. So why isn't rectangle working? So rectangle, rectangle, have I spelt rectangle wrong? Rectangle. Rectangle's starting to look a little bit strange to me, to be honest. Select underscore rectangle, select rectangle. Just going to copy these and just make sure that they are all working. Create rectangle, just make sure that they're all spelt the same. And hopefully, right, drawing app object has no start underscore capital Y. Right, so I made a capital Y here and here as well. So that needs to be lowercase y to reference the start Y here. So it's on line 69 and on line 78, we have start Y needs to be a lowercase y. So now coming back to terminal, if I cancel this, and then I run Python 3 app.py, we'll make sure that everything's working now. Rectangle, perfect. Okay, so now that we have a actual working GUI in terms of the different shapes, let's try and create some colors. So if we bring the contrast up, we actually have a color wheel. So we'll make the outline red and we'll set the fill color to be blue. And then if we create an oval and maybe a couple of lines, we can then create and then if we change the fill color to be, the stroke color to be green and the fill color to be pink, we actually have a working paint app, which is perfect, to be honest. Let's just make sure that the clear button works, and it does. Hopefully this has helped you grasp how we can use Python libraries to create graphical user interfaces for many different reasons. If you learnt something today, please hit that like button and make sure you subscribe to see new videos coming. Thanks, and I'll see you again soon.